I can't tell which, BBFA is all it says. Let me say exhibit.
Now, if you're
At
talking
the
about the
end.
ethics one?
It says exhibit D.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's not the ethics ones, that's from us. Okay, go ahead.
Which
I'm
one?
sorry.
It says ethics, conflict of interest.
You're right, go ahead.
disclosure. Okay, at the bottom, it talks about trustee or candidate for trustee of the Dallas ISD.
Correct.
So when do we give this to the candidates?
That's a good question. And that, I think, goes right back to what Miguel was asking of how do the applicants know of these things?
I don't know if I'd be comfortable with putting candidates on there until we fully flush that out, because as a candidate out there running for office,
But it is a statute
it might be a
requirement.
statute, but we got to figure out a better way to do it. And it shouldn't be candidate, trustee or candidate. It should be trustee has one and candidate has one.
Is it just as simple as including it in the
In the packet.
To put
campaign
it in their
package?
packet.
You can put it in your packet, but you got to get it to the.
But I wouldn't
candidates.
recommend taking it off. I think that's a better way to do it, is to put
Why
it
is
in their
that a better way
packet.
to do it?
Because then we can give them notice of what they need to be doing.
No. But what is, I suggested it be one for trustees and one for candidates, be the same.
Oh, I'm
form.
sorry, so you're saying a
Yeah,
separate
just
form?
the way you have it worded here is trustee or candidate for trustee. And I'm fine with putting it in their packet, but you have to notify them that they've got to fill out this conflict of interest, or
Correct, which would be, actually, they need the whole policy with that, along with that, so.
the policy is fine, but you got
It's fine,
candidates
we
out
can
there
do that.
right now who know nothing about this.
We just put it in their packet.
They've already picked up their packet.
Fax it to them.
We have
Are you talking about the current?
The current.
Yeah.
Well, we
I was
had
just talking
yeah,
about-
we
I was
had-
just talking about future.
No, I'm not talking about future, I'm talking about current.
Yeah.
Current. Because we got people out there now.
The future or the current superintendent?
No, that's a different policy.
No, comment on that, Dr.
They didn't use any policy.
So, and then the last question is that, once this is adopted, how soon does the trustees have to get it in? To you, I can fill mine out right away.
That's why I want to make this
I'm in
clear to
agreement.
you all. The CIS form is effective already, so it's already out there. This is a form that is issued by the Texas Ethics Commission, and so that's why I'm saying they're in effect already. So that's why the exhibit is, that was why I passed that form out to you.
That's not making a lot of sense to me now. I'm struggling. Because if it's already in effect and we're waiting to try to do the policy, why don't the trustees already have the forms to fill out?
That's why I wanted to try to give this training so that you understand it.
If the trustee, if the form, if it's already in effect, write the policy. But if it's already in effect and we don't have the forms, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Do the forms and then do the policy. I'm good with doing the form.
And I agree 100% with you. That's why we're trying to get this information out to you all, so, and let you know that these forms are out here, because these forms
They need to
are,
give us the forms. We need to
yes,
fill them out.
we will make sure, exactly,
Yeah, just give us the forms,
Absolutely.
let us fill them out, and then we'll work on the rest of it.
exactly. But note that these forms are only due, now this is the key, when you have a conflict. They're not just all the time.
Of a gift you receive, not a campaign.
Not a
donation.
campaign donation.
I want to clarify, because some people get confused.
No.
Make sure you educate other
Exactly.
people on that.
Okay.
I agree 100%.
All right. Okay, any other questions about that? All right. Okay, now we'll move on to the ever popular BE local policy. I'm bringing this forward just for a couple of reasons. The first paragraph, you'll see where I put goals, so I added our goals as part of our purpose for meeting. Then the second paragraph you see there, there was conversations during our retreats that we may want to go to a new format that would include business and finance briefing at a separate meeting. So we wouldn't use this board briefing to discuss action items that, require a vote, such as procurement, contracts, things of that nature. So, thought, get this done, out of the way, if this is the direction that this board wants to go, and if not, not. But we need to have the conversation. Other parts of, other parts would be changing the format of this meeting that we're in, the board briefing, to simply talk about what we've talked about so far, performance monitoring, KPIs, goals, and presentations from the administration. And then any action items would again be discussed at the business and finance meeting, or we can just keep doing how we're doing now. So again, just putting this up for discussion to see what direction you want to go. And the reason we're talking about it now is because you'll hear me say several times, we're about to have at least 3 new trustees, and if we're going to make changes to the way we meet, then they should be informed as well. So let's just start over here. We'll go around the room. Trustee Nuttall.
I think since, with the point that you said we're gonna have 3 new trustees, for sure, I think we should wait and allow the 3 new trustees to discuss the current policy and if we want to move forward with a new way of doing business. I think us changing policy in March and then 3 new trustees come in and you get 5 who don't like that. So I think this is a policy that can wait until the new trustees come in to decide how we want to govern ourselves from there. That's just my one trustee's opinion.
Yeah, this is on page 1 of 6. This is just a suggestion because the way it's reading, it's really not sequential. And if I were going to write it, I would say the board briefing will be the 2nd Thursday of each month. The business and finance meeting will be the following Wednesday, and the monthly board meeting will be on the 4th Thursday. Because the way it is, it's kind of like, what the?
It's kind of, it's
bouncing all over
backwards.
the place.
Yeah.
Report information.
Just a language, and I'm not saying I'm for it or against it because I'm not going to be here, but just as a language, I think it's easier to follow.
Right.
And trustees are signing up for 2 Thursdays a month. The trustees that are running our policy, and they're running based on the fact we're meeting 2 Thursdays a month. So I don't think we should change the game, because if you have committed to your 2 Thursdays with your job, with your family, and then you adding 3 meetings, I think that's just, I'm running based on 2 Thursdays, and I've accommodated that schedule.
But does everybody agree with the language change, just
Yeah.
so it's
I think we
sequential?
do,
Okay.
yeah. Trustee Mitch, yeah?
Well, I think Bernadette makes a good point. I think another consideration, though, is that we actually have the benefit of the experience of trustees who've spent years doing this, and if there's a better way to do it, we might as well get it in place and benefit from that experience rather than wait for 3 or 4 new trustees to kind of realize what we've realized, that our Thursday board briefings are just extremely long. And what we have is that when we get to the items that you're suggesting we move to Wednesday, we don't have the same kind of thoroughness in looking at them. If we spent 8 hours doing everything else. So I'm supportive of the change, but I recognize as a good point what Bernadette's concern is.
Yeah. And can I just, well, actually I'll let Trustee Foreman, but I'll clarify what you just said. Okay. Trustee Foreman, well, just to actually clarify both your points. So the board meeting agenda would be published as it is now. It would come out at the same time the briefing agenda would come out. So you would have what you're going to vote on at the board meeting on the same month. So you'll have that opportunity to research, to ask questions of the administration. I picked Wednesday of the week after the board briefing to have this business and finance meeting, knowing that we also have grievance hearings on Thursdays. So I didn't pick 3 Thursdays out of the month. I picked a Wednesday. But both of you make very good points about about board commitment time. Trustee Foreman.
I'd just like to, first of all, we just changed this policy. And that is one of the reasons our board meetings are so long, is because we have policy after policy after policy. And it takes a long time for us to get through them. But I'll just agree with Trustee Nuttall is that I think we need to wait. But I also caution us about continuing to want to do meetings at 11:30 because the community cannot be engaged in those kinds of meetings because they are working. And that's part of what's been a problem for me is that we do have these meetings and so our transparency is not really there because the community is not engaged. Yes, some of them can watch online, but many of them are working. And so I would just like, I don't mind having a conversation about it, but I think the new trustees who will be actually doing this and committing to more time based on this, because I am one of the ones who talked about we needed to have a committee structure. And I still do believe that. I just don't believe it's at 11:30 in the morning. But I do believe we need to let the new trustees weigh in.
Anybody else?
I was outside.
Is this first read?
It is first read.
It seems like this.
But
It seems like this was something that came up in one of our retreats.
It did, and that's why I'm bringing it, because it came up in a retreat, and the idea was thrown out there, I wanted to have a conversation. If it doesn't appear to me that there's support to make this change at this time, then I won't bother with a second read, but I just wanted to quickly put it out there for discussion, because we did have that conversation about what we talked about at board briefings, and what we talked about and vote on at board meetings, so. Anybody else?
No, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
mean, I personally, I think it's a great idea because I know that we've had this conversation. I think Trustee Foreman has some good concerns, about adding another meeting. Perhaps again, a business committee that can take care of this at an appropriate time for a committee to meet makes sense to me. I know it doesn't necessarily make sense to everybody else, but I think this structure allows us to be able to do what we committed to saying that we were going to do when we met over the course of multiple months. How do we focus on talking about what matters the most to kids? Let's focus on our goals, and then let's talk in a separate meeting about our finances. Let's see. So I'd be fine with the second read so long as board members had the opportunity to really flesh out what they think this should look like, and using this as a backbone.
Okay.
And I think the other thing, if we're going to wait for another board to come on, the only caution I would place on that is they're not going to know. So then it's perhaps a year-long conversation about what this even would potentially look like. I think it's better to have them to set something up and then they step into that and they know this is how we're going to move forward with this, and this is what the meetings are going to look like. But I get where Trustee Foreman's coming from. That's why I think it makes sense to have some sort of a committee that can commit to doing this extra meeting, and then presenting their recommendations or presenting what they think at the fourth Thursday meeting to the full board, and then we go and we have a vote.
Okay. All right.
I didn't get that this would be a committee.
No, right now it doesn't look like it. That's what I'm,
Yeah, it's
that's
like
what I'm
the
saying is
full
that
board.
That'd be
we could have that
Addition,
conversation.
I thought I was missing.
But then that brings in a different conversation about how we do board committees, which needs to be addressed, so. Okay. We'll keep moving forward with it, and you will, just give me your suggestions, at least we can wordsmith it to where it's something, legitimate to talk about. Next one is BDF, Board Internal Organization Citizen Advisory Committees. This is actually a brand new local policy, did not exist before. I've been working on this for a while. I've been reading And if you want to go to their policy libraries for Austin, Plano, and Houston, they have very similar policies on citizen advisory committees. So what are we talking about? Citizen advisory committees, parent engagement committees, bond advisory committees, future facility task force, all the committees that we've put together over the years. The only one by law is the Student Health Advisory Committee, and we're all familiar with that. My point in bringing this committee is, over the years, I've put people on these committees, and I've gotten feedback all the way from, well, that was the biggest waste of time, I don't know what we're doing here, I don't know why we're here, we're giving input, and I don't feel like anybody's really listening to us, to the opposite end, to where the committee feels like they're a subcommittee of the board, and they're going to make decisions, and they're going to make changes, and they get all excited, and then it's over, and then a couple of months later, well, what'd y'all do with that? Well, we didn't do anything with that. You're an advisory committee. We appreciate the hard work, and we going to take your opinions, to the administration, and just kind of seems to die off. So, if you look at Plano, Houston, and Austin, they vary in degree of structure. I wanted to keep it, simple, and really just develop a shell for creating these citizen advisory committees. I guess the most important thing that you need to read into this is hold on. Nope. Operation of the committee. The operation and purpose of the committee shall have a board-approved charter, which shall be kept as an exhibit to BDF local. The charter shall establish membership qualifications, purpose, and length of service. So a couple of ISDs are doing this already, and they have them online. They really put a lot of thought on not only the composition, but also the purpose of the committee. And, I think that's a good practice for not only the board, but for committees. And if we're going to ask citizens to dedicate, their free time to these committees, to at least have a charter that they can go, that they know, okay, this is when it starts, this is when it ends, this is our purpose, this is what we're asking to consider. Some of the ISDs that I've mentioned, some of them list the committees that they have in the local policy. I didn't do that, but I did give some recommendations in the third paragraph down. Committees may be established based on the immediate and future needs of the district, including but not limited to school choice, career and technology education, parent engagement, bond advisory, attendance boundary and utilization, etc. So just to give you some thought on the type of committees that would go into this. So we'll start over here. Trustee Beacom.
Yeah, on that page 1 of 2, when we're talking about the charter shall establish, I think we need to be careful with that, because I think you can have a generic charter, because otherwise you might have a group of people that you've gotten together, and they might spend 6 months coming up with what they think is important, and then it comes to the board and we just say, hey, forget it, we're not going to do that. So I think we're the ones that are going to have to define what they're going to do, rather than to put it on them.
And that's why it's called a board-approved charter. So.
Yeah, but the way it reads right here, okay, it's a little iffy. Okay. The other thing, and I'm very glad that it says the composition, where it's very specific that each trustee, and I think it should be this way on any committee that we set up, whether it's bond or facilities, each trustee has one appointee. And that, because otherwise, I might decide I want to have 4 on there. It makes the committee lopsided. I just think that we need to tighten up on that. One person, each board trustee has one appointment, but this looks pretty good.
Trustee Mitchke, then Trustee Foreman.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this and putting together a framework for us. I do agree that we should only have one appointee per committee, with possible exception of the SHAC committee, Student Health Advisory Committee. When Bob Weiss was here with the Attendance Boundary Committee, we asked him that question, and he was pretty emphatic that it should only be one member from appointed by a trustee, and I assume we could have substitutes or alternates or something like that, but the idea of just having an unlimited number of appointees to these committees makes the committees, I think, less functional. So, and in my case, I'd have to cut back on a couple of the committees that I've put people on, but I think it's a much better practice. Thanks.
Trustee Form?
Board and district responses to committees. Last sentence says this will be presented to the board and superintendent for study and for incorporation into the district's improvement plan and budget. I would.
Where appropriate.
That's
Yeah, next page it says where appropriate.
where appropriate. I wouldn't even put that in because someone might misunderstand or believe that that is the work of committees many times is not incorporated. And that's just part of committee work. And that has been the frustration of many people. I've probably been around, served on more boards than everybody here put together, including with the ISD. And that's been part of the frustration is people misunderstand what's going to happen when they're on these committees. And we give them false hope. What they do is bring forward a recommendation that may or may not be accepted. And we should not be pretending that everything they bring forward is going to be accepted. It may or may not be accepted. So that's just a word of caution. And then it talks about how no committee shall exist longer than 2.5 years unless extended by the board and stated in the charter. There are committees like the bond committee, which I served on, which is going to go longer than 2.5 years. And so I would hope that that would be something that would be considered as you talk about a specific charter. But there are other committees that I served on that went for years, like the African American Advisory Committee, the Minority and Women-Owned Business Committee. There are committees that we have that are ongoing, and there's no sunset. There's absolutely no sunset, and so we need to take that into consideration as we talk about this policy. I have no problem with each trustee appointing one citizen to each of the committees. And as always, the superintendent names the chair of the committee. But the part about the membership criteria for each committee should reflect the purpose of the committee and shall be clearly stated in a charter. Well, I might put someone on the bond committee that has no bond experience. And so, but I feel like that person would be a good representative of my district. And so that is a concern because you might put somebody on that might not have that kind of experience, but you feel will be a good representative of your district and will learn and catch on at some time. And then just one other question. How many committees do we currently have? Do we know?
Not that many right now, but in the past we've had task force that we've created just
We know
based
they go
on
away. Just as
right.
they finish their deal, the task force go away. I was just wondering about committees. Board committees.
Like citizen,
Well, The citizen, yeah, citizens review committee is gone, isn't it? Or is it still going?
I like
Had a bunch of
the,
committees one time.
Yeah.
On the committee for why?
Well, I was just wondering, that's just an interesting question, and how they're operating, or if they're still operating. Would be interesting, to know.
we just, can you just quickly, before I give it to Trustee Flores, just address your or your question about the last paragraph. I was looking for a feedback loop, and I see where, yeah, I probably should have put for possible incorporation into the district improvement plan, or even take it out altogether, as you suggest. What I'm interested in is creating a feedback loop to where, after the committee work is done, that they just don't, disappear without any interaction with the board. So, come in front of the board, present your findings or recommendations. That way we give them, we have closure on their work, and they feel like their work was worth it, and we hear and we respect what the time they put in. So that's really, I'm just looking for that feedback loop to where we can take the recommendations and give it to the administration for further study.
Could just put a period after superintendent.
Well, I guess the question that I would have is that you got committees on here like choice committees. So you go out and get a bunch of yahoos that's come in here, and then they're gonna tell us what choice schools we're gonna have. We're gonna create more choice schools of about 200 kids, which is costing us a bunch of money. And so I just don't want that kind of a message going out. I think it is clearly important that committees have an opportunity to come in and give a final report to the board. But I don't want the expectation that it's gonna be a part of our improvement plan. That I do not want.
Terry, my suggestion would be on page 1 or 2, that very last bullet point, just say the committee recommendations, either budgetary or programmatic, will be presented to the board and superintendent,
And leave it at
period,
that.
and then cut everything else out.
Do I need to put the term Yahoo in here?
Yes, no.
But you,
Put that combine.
All right, Trustee Flores.
but Pablo,
Pablo. No, I think this, so my only comment on this is that I think it creates some clarity, not only for us as to how these things get created, and that the board has to approve the charter, the board knows what the charter is, the composition. I think it makes a lot of sense, to have, one member per trustee. Personally, we could look to see if it would be, again, the charter could include a lot of things, like to say that the person has to live in the trustee's district, or has to be a parent, or has to be, again, depending on what the purpose of the committee is. And that could all be put into the charter. The board votes on it, so it would take, whatever changes need to be made to the charter would eventually require a vote of the board versus just, the board president just creating it. And then something else that, again, that charter could include would be the feedback board. So when we did Star Employee Commission, we had every trustee appointed somebody. We did the work. 8 months later, the committee came and presented. We voted on the 17, 18 recommendations. And 2 years later, we had TASB come in, look at those recommendations and say, how have we done on these? And then the board got a report on, the result of, 2 years of work after Star Employee Commission, or 3 years. I think that's the kind of structure that I think the folks who helped us appreciate, because they know that 3 years later, we could get all sorts of reports, and then we just put them in a shelf and forget about them. Versus having, something in that charter that says, creates that expectation, or the board, when they vote on approving the thing, saying 2 years later, we will revisit this just to see how we did on our recommendation. So that would be, again, all that good stuff can put into the charter. We can benchmark against other districts, and let's see what they've done and incorporate it. So I like this. I think that, it may need a little tweaking here and there, but I think it's very clear at the outset as to what we are asking these great folks to do to help us and kind of the bounds that we're going to give them, I think would be really, really useful. So I'm supportive of moving forward on, revising this and making it a policy.
I would like to just know where we are with committees now, because we have the discipline committee, I know we have the bond, we have the DIP, district improvement, and attendance committee. So where are we today in our committees? And which ones are by law? I know the attendance, we have to do that one, but I guess we just need to look to where we are today and how do we make those committees maybe better in this process of doing this policy. Because I know we have bond and I know we have the discipline and they're going to bring.
But the discipline, I don't think that's a board committee.
No, we get to appoint people. They ask us to appoint people.
Board Services can put together that list, right?
Yeah, they sent an email out for us to appoint people to the code of conduct. You didn't appoint anybody?
I don't remember.
They did send an email.
It's called a code of conduct. I don't know if it's called
Oh, the
this.
code of conduct.
They
Yeah,
sent
yeah.
the email, we supposed to appoint, but I guess we need to see where we are today.
Yeah.
And how is that, and how do we make them stronger, better, or maybe move to some new?
Functional.
Okay. And Austin?
One comment and then one question. My comment is this is, I think, a very good practice. I think that early in my career, someone advises don't ever appoint a committee without giving them a charge, and that's what the charter does. It gives them a very specific charge, and this is board approved, so that is fantastic. And my question is, I'm assuming that this does not apply to any committees advisory committees that I have for myself. I just wanted to make sure.
I purposefully left that out for now. No, I think this.
Now.
I think.
For now.
I think
He's only got a month and a half.
one of the ISDs I think I looked at actually had language on the superintendent appointed committees, but I think it was as simple as the superintendent has the right to form committees as he or she sees fit. So pretty basic. Didn't feel it was necessary for this particular policy. Yes.
So, how did Faye? You probably would help me with this. How does this also speak to ad hoc committees that the chair can appoint via Robert's rules?
No, this is separate and apart from the board president and the board members themselves. This, I believe, was his intent to outside people.
Okay.
That's all different policy discussion.
Yeah, and do we have? There really are no rules around the advisory committees that board chairs want to appoint outside of they can't appoint them because we've adopted Robert's rules. Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Robert's rules.
That's it. Thanks.
Anybody else?
I think it's a great policy, Eric. Good job bringing it forward.
Anybody else? All right. Keep working on that. That was just a first read. Next up, EHAC Local, sponsored by Ken Smisco.
This is also a first read.
Yes.
It's really updating the middle school secondary course offerings to match with new legal policy that we got from TASB. And it moves a lot of the specific courses and what grade they'll be offered to an exhibit to help clean up the language. I think Mr. Reyes is going to be over here in a moment, but if you have questions, we'll be glad to try to answer them for you. There are two new requirements that are already in legal, just to point those out. One is that students do have to complete a TEKS-based fine arts course sometime in grades 6, 7, or 8. New TEA requirements there, and at least 4 semesters of moderate or vigorous daily physical activity for at least 30 minutes as part of the PE curriculum. So that's what you've got here.
Yes.
So, and on that, the PE, if they're doing drill team or cheerleading, would that be considered vigorous activity?
They have to teach the TEKS. As long as they're teaching, they can.
So that would be fairly easy to do, just
Imagine so.
line it up, okay.
Any questions about this? Pretty straightforward. All right, thank you.
I'm in charge of the work.
You're just there.
Okay, next up is GBA Local.
Yeah,
brought forth by me and Cynthia Wilson. Pretty simple, but I've also got an underlying agenda here as well. On the page 2 of 3, you'll see some just cleanup language. This is about our district transparency and public information requests. You'll see that I've incorporated into our information that goes on our public information portal, the board adopted district goals, the board adopted KPIs, and any TEA required reports, and you'll see a note there that says CBR legal and local. At the moment, I think there are 35 required reports from TEA, and just in the spirit of even more transparency, putting those reports into a single location, and then I write there. Then
Not the tracker, I hope.
yeah, not the tracker. Faye and I did have that conversation, or maybe I had it with somebody else, I can't remember, but we did discuss the tracker, about putting that on the public portal, but that sounds like we need to have a conversation about that anyway. And then lastly, that last paragraph, an administrative review of all reports required by this policy will occur no later than June of each year. That's an administrative review. And then a report identifying completed reports and requests, as well as outstanding reports and requests, will be presented to the board at the next October board briefing. So, again, say it again, with possible three new, maybe 4 trustees that are new, this board is going to lose some institutional knowledge. So I'm trying to help out future boards on the reports that we receive, and really set up a system of not only required reports, but where they can go for information. But it's not just the board; it's also the public. I've heard more than once, and I don't agree with it, that we're not a very transparent district. I would argue that we're very transparent, and we have more information on our website than you probably want to know about. However, I don't think we make it easy, and I've already made this as a personal recommendation to the district, but improving that public portal link that's buried at the bottom of our homepage of our website to a bigger button at the top, and really organizing that almost as a library. And if you go through that public portal, you'll notice that there's even some information that hasn't been updated for a year or two. So there's some, public information. Being transparent requires manpower, but I think it's our responsibility to do that. So, are there any questions? And you can look at BR Legal to see those 35 TEA reports. But again, they're good reports, and since they're required by law, they might as well be accessible. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just put a comment that we wrote this thing 6 years ago, and it's still in place, and very proud of our work on it. So you're right, this is, I think, for a public entity, perhaps the most transparent of all the organizations, because we put all this stuff out there.
Good job, Edwin.
Thanks, man.
Moving right along.
All right.
Arm hurts.
No question about that. All right. Next is
First read, right?
This is a first read. So, any recommendations on language or other things that you want to see? Let me know, or let board services know. Next up, DH Local, sponsored by Trustee Dan Mitchke and Carrie Chapman. I'll let you take it away since you're yours.
Okay, well, there are really 2 main changes here. One is it updates the definition of bullying to correspond with what the definition is that is used by Houston ISD. I think if you go through each of the paragraphs, that is the kind of behavior described in each of those paragraphs is not the kind of behavior we want anyone engaging in. And then the second thing it does is it includes an express statement that if there is a finding of bullying, that some action needs to be taken. Doesn't specify what action it is, and that's left to the discretion of the administration. But it does basically marry a provision about consequences with the description of bullying. That's basically it.
Anything to add?
I guess it's better late than never, Dan. 3 years of bullying, I guess it's better late than never. Employees, thank you.
Is there any questions about the language in this policy?
I looked at Houston's,
This isn't the first time that I've seen this concept. I know that the Teachers Association brought it up a couple of times, and so it's good to see it come forward. How does the administration interpret it? How do you feel about it? It is being done at Houston ISD, so it seems like it's...
We have no objection to it. It's just adding more distinct clarifying language.
Can you prove, how are you gonna make sure, it's not happening? Is it a report they write? Is it a form they fill out? Is it a grievance they file?
I'm assuming we follow the same procedure as an investigation, maybe a report to the hotline, or it's reported by the employee, and we do our part to do the investigation and follow the same procedure we would with any other misconduct.
So do you investigate anonymous misconduct?
It depends. Yes, we take everything seriously.
You said someone just can call in and make something up on anybody, right?
We have to do a little checking before we launch an investigation if it is.
But you kind of check.
Yeah.
Because you can't go to the source to confirm.
Right.
So if you're getting really bullied or something's happening, I would think you would come forward with your name and your...
Correct.
If it's that serious.
Yeah.
Cowards only do anonymous.
Cowards?
Yeah, cowards.
Oh, I think
Only do stuff anonymously. They throw the rock and hide. Something's really happening to you, you put your name to it and say, this is what's happening to me, and this is true. I just hope we're careful about that anonymous, because you can ruin a person's life.
Yes, ma'am.
If I'm bullied, trust me, I'm gonna tell your name. I'm gonna beat a bully. I've been bullied 3 years. So it's a assault wound inside of me.
Trustee Mitchell, since you brought this forward,
Yeah, go ahead.
since you brought this forward, I just stand with the same tone that Trustee Nuttall is talking about in regards to anonymous. You can ruin people based on anonymous. And so, Superintendent Hinojosa, I caution us when we start launching investigations based on anonymous. It could be very hurtful. And so, as we look at this policy, and I just heard Ms. Chapman say that they do take anonymous into consideration. In fact, I'd just like to know how many investigations you've done, because we've never seen them. And specifically, how many anonymous? Because I would just caution us as we go through this process.
Yeah, I'll just say that, I think the information request you're making is valid, but this policy doesn't speak to anonymous versus, open.
No, if they're gonna, I ask, how are they gonna make the thing? Is it, how do I say Dan Mishke is bullying me? Do I come forward and write a report and say Dan Mishke? Or can I just say, my principal at my school is bullying me, but you don't even know who they're bullying and it's anonymous? That's how the conversation came up, because next, where do we stop? I can say Elwin Flores is doing something inappropriate to me over here. And it's, I'm just saying, you gotta be very careful about what you say, because where does it stop? Where does it stop? So I think if we're gonna have it, people, if you're truly being bullied or something's happening, you should come forward, and maybe the person talk to you and it's anonymous between you and the principal don't know,
Right.
but at least you know where to go get the fact information about how did the bullying take place, you know, where there's detail, where you just can't start a witch hunt on someone. Because we're known for starting witch hunting.
It's similar to a sexual harassment complaint. Both of those you want to treat very, very carefully, because the same concern would be you could ruin a person's career, you know. So we treat those very, very confidentially.
Trust me, I've been. I trust me. So I'm just saying, I don't want us going down that rabbit hole with folks and their life. I can come to you and tell you, and then you do the investigation. And the principal may not know it's me, but you know it's me. Dr. Hino's girl. Never. But the other Michael did.
Anything else?
No.
No bullying?
No book.
Except for Solis.
That means for you boys
And that would
too.
forward.
No bullying in paper or anonymously.
Yeah.
Only Facebook.
All right. Last but not least, CW Local. Before we begin, you'll let me editorialize for just a minute.
This is cool.
This is
I would agree, all these policies. Yes.
Building bullying.
And I'm gonna write a formal complaint. Trustee Edwin Cowell from Bernadette
You know what? Put Pablo in there too.
Pablo.
Apollo?
Pablo. I want to speak to Pablo after this meeting.
Y'all are so bad.
Yeah. For as long as I've been on the board, there's not a policy that's driven me more crazy than probably CW Local. I just think, you know, talking and discussing, naming and things, I acknowledge we have more important things to talk about. I acknowledge that the name on a building has absolutely zero impact on student achievement. So it's kind of ironic that I'm the one bringing this forward, but you know, sometimes boards have to deal with the social issues of our time, and our time to talk about this has come, and it will be coming more in the future. Just to rewind, when the flag came down in South Carolina, I immediately started getting phone calls, and I know Trustee Solis got phone calls. I don't know if y'all got phone calls as well, but it was you know, phone calls from media. When, you know, basically, when are you going to start renaming schools named after Confederate generals? It wasn't if the board is going to consider renaming schools based on Confederate generals. It was when. So at that time, I was like, took a step back and said, whoa, you know, I personally am not going to make a policy decision based on emotion or public pressure. You know, we have a policy. Policy says if it comes from the community, we will consider it, and left it at that. And I know Trustee Solis said the same thing because we talked about it. So with great interest, I watched what happened in South Carolina, watched the discussion that happened in New Orleans, where my family used to live, watched the discussion in Houston ISD, which has been less than pleasant. So I just trying to come up with a way that we could have this discussion as a board without cameras, which you'll notice none are here, which I think is great, without refighting the Civil War. You know, really just having a policy discussion on how we and why we name facilities. I thought I was going to get through this year without actually having this conversation, but the community, at least one part of our community, has spoken, and I know we're not there yet, but students at John B. Hood took a poll, brought forth through the media. They have not come to the board yet, and I assume that Trustee Nuttall is having conversations in that community with how best to move forward. But we have 3 or 4 even more schools that could go through the same process. So my thought is, okay, are we going to fight this? Are we going to have this discussion all at the same time, or are we just going to let the community come forward with changes? And that's really what the conversation today is about how best to move forward. I'm sure you saw the editorial from the Dallas Morning News. They want us to change them. They just want us to go out and we're just going to change them. And I didn't want to approach it that way for the reasons that you see in Houston. It's just become an ugly argument. And the last thing I want is a 5-4 vote either way on this issue. So I bring this policy forward to launch the conversation, and I will go in any direction the board wants to. But let me just be clear on my personal opinion. I think we should rename the schools, but I do appreciate the suggestions that we should at least acknowledge history and put up plaques. I think this is a great educational opportunity, not only for our students, but for our city and for us as a board. I also want to clarify, and we'll get to it, my military achievement thoughts, which I'm also using as just a launching point for a discussion. I think the conversation around Confederacy and those people associated with it is exactly why I think military achievement is too vague. So what I did is substituted Trustee Mitchkay's thoughts in his editorial with persons who have received the Congressional Medal of Honor. Now, whether that's for future schools or we grandfather in current schools is a discussion that we can have. And again, we can have this conversation for the next 30 minutes and then drop it, or really I'm just looking for direction from the board. But again, having it on a policy level and not the board is making a decision and we're forging ahead with changing these names because that's the way it should be done. I think if we had gone that way, we would have tons of cameras in front of us, and it would put y'all in a position that maybe you don't personally want to be in. There are other aspects of this policy that I've took the opportunity to look at and review, which I will go over, but really we all know what the underlying message in this policy is and where we're headed. I do look forward to seeing any recommendations from the students and community at John B. Hood and any others that come forward.